Hi, I'm Jay, and I've got an agenda. Well, welcome back. I do appreciate you subscribing. Thank you for checking the like, giving it a thumbs up. Thank you for sharing where you feel that it might be appropriate. I appreciate you coming back. Thank you very much. It's good to see you again. As I've said before in a couple of other videos that I've done, I spend a lot of time each week on the highway. It's how I make my money to pay my bills. And over the last couple of years, I've begun to notice these stickers that say some iteration of student drivers, please be patient. And, I began to notice that many of these, in fact, most of these stickers are on vehicles where it's apparent that the people driving them aren't student drivers. People in their 30s, people in their 40s, their 50s, they're driving these shitbox cars, these dented up minivans. Maybe the dented minivans are a result of teenage drivers, but it got me wondering, what's going on with all these stickers? And so I looked into it a little bit, and on the surface, the reason for it may have been that parents were putting these on their cars so other drivers would cut their teenage drivers some slack as they gain in their proficiency in driving. No doubt, teens probably do need a lot of attention on the highway. I mean, the reckless driving statistics for teens they speak for themselves, whether it's through speeding or texting or looking at TikTok or running red lights, not wearing seat belts. The data is there, and certainly we can expect the unexpected from student drivers or teen drivers. But are there really this many student drivers on the road? And are these drivers who are using these stickers, using them as an excuse to be irresponsible or inconsiderate or just because they're incompetent, or are they doing it just because they think it's funny and they're being an asshole? Now, I did a quick online search of the topic because I don't have anything else better to do in my life, obviously. And I found a number of comments that people were making who were asking these same questions, and some Redditor somewhere said that they felt like it was that whenever they see those stickers or whenever they saw those stickers, they thought it was some kind of inside joke that they weren't in on. Others said, I'm convinced that, and I'm leaning in this direction. Some said that they were convinced that the student driver stickers are used by bad drivers, especially when you see a car weaving in and out of traffic, or just, they're just being a real dumbass. Some speculate that the stickers could have been purchased by drivers attempting to gain leniency from the police, but that's a ludicrous argument. Those stickers aren't going to get anybody off the hook from a ticket. There are a number of other ways that a police officer can tell whether or not that someone is a new driver or student driver. You need look no further than the expiration dates on the licenses and so forth. But maybe the reason the increase in these stickers isn't that drivers are hopeful to get leniency from the police, but that they are trying to somehow mitigate road rage. One person in every 16 hours in the United States falls victim to a suspected road rage incident. I think that's probably, that's got to be an old stat in my observation, but nevertheless. And this useless phenomenon also begs the question: how long will the sticker remain on the car? Are they going to leave it on there for a year, 2 years, 3 years, the life of the car? At what point do they stop regarding themselves as a student driver and take it off? At what point do they feel that they've graduated from student driving into the stage of a competent and competent driver? So what's my opinion of these stickers, of these student driver stickers? Well, the vast majority of people who put them on their car are not student drivers. And I don't regard them as such. I don't regard them as such. They are liars, and they're really bad liars. And I'll give them the same measure of respect and courtesy that I give to anybody that lies to me. I won't treat them with any more leniency than I do toward any other drivers on the road around me. So if you got one on your car and you're not a student driver, you're a liar. You're a liar. All right, now the second and final thing on my agenda for this video, and I only have 2 things on the agenda now, is that I want to talk about the paper tiger that is the United States of America. The U.S. is posturing itself in the world now as the toughest kid on the block, the bully, the one that wants to dominate everyone. And what it is beginning to find out is that people, both state and non-state actors, are now standing up against it. And what we're finding out is just how weak and increasingly, not completely, but increasingly impotent the United States is becoming. Let me give you 3 examples. The first one is I want to talk a bit about sanctions against Russia and other nations that aren't working. I also want to talk about the weakening military power of the United States, and that the American rules-based global order, if I can put it in that way, is collapsing. It's coming apart, and there's nothing they can do about it. Now, we all know that the United States has sanctioned nations such as Iran and North Korea. They've blockaded Cuba, Russia. There are a plethora of articles found within the ruling class media machine that are now confessing and telling us that U.S. sanctions against, well, anybody that they've placed sanctions upon are not working, and they will no longer work. Now, sanctions are a form of economic warfare, I'll get it right, that are intended to cause so much suffering among the populations of whatever country the United States is imposing those sanctions upon, that those people will rise up and overthrow a government that the United States bourgeoisie finds as an obstruction to its capitalist imperialist goals. But as we can see, and as you can read, this form of economic warfare has now become impotent. Every nation now that's been sanctioned by the United States has not only found a way around those sanctions, but they now continue to develop, and they're thriving under new economic relations and economic avenues. The overall effect of these sanctions is that they are actually weakening American economic strength and those of its puppets. We need go no further than the in-your-face example of Germany and England. Both of those nations are now spiraling into recession because they obeyed their U.S. masters and cut themselves off from Russian resources, relatively inexpensive Russian resources that help them to remain competitive and prosperous. And because they've surrendered, they've shaken in their boots at the pitiful little meow of the paper tiger of the United States, they've surrendered their sovereignty to the U.S. And the sanctions against Russia have had a devastating impact on their economies. The German economy is now deindustrializing at an astounding rate. And it's facing a recession and an impending political and social crisis. And the same can be said of England. Although I think that the economic recession came on a lot quicker in Germany. Now, Russia, like North Korea and Iran and Syria, not to mention a host of other sanctioned peoples, have not only been able to sidestep the U.S. and Western sanctions, but they have enjoyed significant growth in their economies, due in large part to their economic cooperation with one another. The U.S. sanctions have not only brought China and Russia together, those sanctions have forced nations to come together in new cooperative economic blocs and strategic partnerships that were heretofore not considered. I mean, these sanctions have really changed the game, and they brought about a global shift. And American unipolarity or Western unipolarity is now gone. That it's not coming back. And in a strange way, the sanctions have actually forced other nations to be resourceful, to develop on their own without the United States, and becoming very successful at that. The net effect of U.S. sanctions has been to weaken its own global, imperial, and strategic position due to the rise of these new multilateral economic and military entities. The U.S. capitalist ruling class is not interested in competition, no matter what sort of moronic libertarian spew might come out of their media prostitutes, but they're concerned only with monopoly and complete dominance. And this is creating contradictions and a crisis that they cannot solve. They don't have any answers. Until the U.S. capitalist order is pulled down by the American working class and replaced by a socialist mode of production, by the governance of the workers, and a planned economy which also promotes international economic cooperation, not competition, the U.S., as you've known it, will continue to circle the drain. And no matter how loud people shout MAGA, it's not going to get better. Read your Marx and your Engels and Lenin. They've already written about the very character and the demise of this present-day capitalism. The system's changing, whether we want it to or not. And the consequences for us here in the United States are not going to be good. The second aspect of this paper tiger is the weakening military power of the United States. Recently, the U.S. Navy attempted to escort 2 merchant ships through a Yemeni missile blockade of the Bab el-Mandeb Straits, but they were thwarted in that mission. Despite the fact that there were 5 U.S. destroyers in escort, Yemeni missiles just missed one of those merchant marine ships, taking weapons to the Israeli occupiers of Palestine by 100 yards. And at that point, the captains of those 2 merchant ships wheeled their vessels about, and they left the waterway, and the U.S. is not shipping arms through that waterway any longer. This defeat, though it was downplayed by the U.S. ruling class propaganda, sent shockwaves through the leadership of the Navy and the U.S. Department of Defense. Commercial shipping through the Bab el-Mandeb Strait has all but ceased. Relatively cheap swarms of missiles defeated the defenses, or the lack thereof, of the most sophisticated and expensive weapon systems of the U.S. Navy. Only days ago, Rear Admiral Mark Miguez stated that unmanned surface vessels operating and controlled by Yemen's army have become a nightmare for the U.S. Navy forces stationed in the Red Sea. The U.S. Navy lacks the intelligence, I said lacks the intelligence, to deal effectively with this low-tech threat to its vessels and to those merchantmen in those straits. I want you to hear me again. The U.S. Navy, the formerly greatest Navy in the world, cannot defend against threats from very high-tech to extremely low-tech weapons. And that begs the question, why then are we spending so much money on a Navy that can't even defend itself? The Russian military victories in the proxy war of NATO on the nation that will be formally known as Ukraine has exposed the ineffectiveness and the obsolescence of U.S. legacy weapon system. All of the U.S. and NATO combat hardware that was given to the Ukrainians has either been destroyed or it's now been so effectively countered so as to make them almost completely ineffective. 5 out of 7 American Patriot batteries have been completely destroyed for a cost of about $10 million. And yet somehow our government can't seem to dedicate our money to fully funding Medicare for all, or student debt relief, or homelessness, or some of the other things that are going on here at home, much less the border crisis. Furthermore, the Russians, the Chinese, and the Iranians all now possess hypersonic missile capabilities that the U.S. and the Western powers have not developed, and they cannot counter. What this means is that these militaries, that is, those of Russia, China, Iran, who knows who else has that technology now, have the capability to strike, damage, and sink U.S. aircraft carriers and the attendant support ships. And the U.S. Navy has absolutely no way to stop these hypersonic weapons. Thus, America's mighty Navy has been rendered almost obsolete. And additionally, Russia's hypersonic missiles have the range to reach out and destroy military and communication targets through pinpoint strikes anywhere in Europe and over the Arctic to strike targets in the United States. Iran has the capability now, through this shared technology, to strike and destroy any and all targets within Israel, and those missiles cannot be stopped. This fact, in part, is one of the reasons why the U.S. will not provoke a direct confrontation with Iran. They won't do it. No matter all the rhetoric and the blustering that they do, they're not going to do it. The consequences would devastate American bases, Israeli targets, as well as close off the flow of oil to the West, and that would plunge the U.S. into an immediate economic and domestic crisis. And those in the ruling class who talk a tough story damn well know it. And this is to say nothing of the deficits that the United States has in tactical technologies such as drones and the capabilities to defeat them. I think they're working on something now, but if they were to enter into the battlefield against Russia or Iran at the present moment, they couldn't stop them. And not only is the U.S. far behind in military technologies, because it's just not profitable to the military-industrial complex to develop new weapon systems. Might as well sell the old crappy legacy ones, right? Just keep making those. The U.S. is failing to meet its manpower requirements in both quality and numbers of recruits. The Army, the Air Force fell 10,000 short of personnel that were needed to maintain its force requirements, while the U.S. Navy reported a shortfall of 6,000 sailors in 2023. The Army, for one, has lowered its physical and educational requirements in an attempt to scrape the bottom of the barrel to make up for its recruiting shortfalls. And we're going to win a war? Now, I won't go into the reasons why young people no longer desire to offer themselves to the service of the most violent organ of the U.S. imperialist ruling class, but let it suffice to say that almost across the board, the U.S. military is much weaker than it was just 5 years ago, and it's now at its lowest point since the end of the Second World War. Not long ago, someone in the imperialist machine resurrected the idea of a national conscription or draft. But others who are getting, their eyes are beginning to open to the condition of the U.S. working class, put the kibosh on that. And they did so because they want to prevent a massive social pushback were that policy to be implemented. And finally this. The American rules-based order is collapsing. Whatever version of a great America we envision, the U.S. will never and can never regain its prestige, its credibility, or even its ability to impose its will or to project its power again. There might be some small nations and some non-state actors, that they can punch down on, but they're never going to be able to impose their will on somebody that can stand up against them. No matter what the ventriloquist dummy Joe Biden says about America being the most powerful nation ever, or how much Trump blathers on about making America great again, the air is rushing out of that rhetorical balloon. As we have seen during the terms of these two mentally deranged presidents, they can't really stop the agenda of those unelected imperialist power brokers who are subverting the Constitution, they're subverting the rule of law, and who bypass anything that resembles democracy to fulfill their own will and desires while the rest of us are getting stuck with the tab. The ruling class has driven this country into a ditch, and they're going to leave the wreckage to us. In a talk with American correspondent Anna Louise Strong, Chairman Mao Zedong said, and I quote, "All reactionaries are paper tigers. In appearance, the reactionaries are terrifying, but in reality, they are not so powerful. From a long-term point of view, it is not the reactionaries, but the people who are powerful." In this conversation, he said that imperialists, most notably, will become paper tigers, and indeed, Chairman Mao was prescient, and they are. And as the objective material conditions reveal, his observations are coming to pass. Excuse me. The U.S. government has lost its legitimacy among the masses. It can no longer and will no longer respond to popular political will. The U.S. government has lost its military and economic dominance, though there are still some who refuse to or are slow to admit that. Those who've been under the jackboot of U.S. hegemony have not only begun to free themselves, but are also beginning to throw punches against their former oppressor. For the world and for the peace, this is a very good thing. We can build a better society. We can build a better economy. We can build a better world. But we cannot do that by going through the same mechanisms which have created all of these problems in the first place. Endorsing the present system through your voting, through your patriotism, through your meager participation in endorsement of the paper tiger, and not some brave act of resistance toward change. Organize, educate, agitate, and revolutionize. Endorsing the present system through your voting is an endorsement of the paper tiger, and it is not some brave act of resistance toward change. I'll see you next time.